your host. This is Francamente, the podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you so much for listening. And without further ado, let's bias your football content. Hello. Welcome to episode 15. Episode 15. What a good number. I love it. I love it so much. I'm so happy to be here. I am rocking the space buns today again, but this is the second time I rocked space buns for recording an episode. I always think it's so cute and like childish. If you're tuning in on YouTube, you can see the space buns. You can see the kit. I'm wearing a Manchester United warm-up official Adidas. Like, it's one of my favorite, like most comfiest kits to wear, and I got it for free at a fan fest. Thank you, Premier League. Thank you, NBC Sports, before they got stingy with it, because the last two fan fests have been not good on the merch front, but this was literally free. You used to get free full ass kits, and now you don't get shit. Okay, I get it. It got too popular. I mean, when you're a day one, I guess those are the perks that you get. But yeah, that's what I'm wearing. Easy day today, kit wise. And let's get right into it. We have a lot to talk about today. As it pertains to, I think the connecting thread is going to be misogyny. We're going to talk a little bit about rape culture. We're going to talk a little bit about the Women's World Cup. And just in general, as always, things will come up around misogyny, sexism, all of that fun stuff. So, yeah, so let's get right to it. So I want to start off by saying that cancel culture is not real. Cancel culture is not real. And if you follow me, you know that I have a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting business. And through that business, I have a workshop about cancel culture, right? So there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of nuance, but I start out by saying that cancel culture is not real because time and time again, rapists get away with rape, face zero consequences, and misogyny makes sure that women are scared into not coming forward when assault happens. And we see this time and time again with celebrities, but specifically, of course, I'm referring to the most recent, but not by any means the only or even the most egregious case of rape in the football community. And this one of a rapist getting away with it in the football community. And this one, and it's Benjamin Mendy. And I when we talk about this, I hesitate to even like say their names because I don't want to bring on, haters or anything like that. It doesn't really matter who it is, right? It doesn't really matter who it is. We see the same story happen again and again and again, and it's really disheartening and it's really traumatizing to be a woman in a football space when this happens, and especially for folks, women and non-men, who have experienced assault or rape. It's a continuing message of you don't matter, right? You don't matter. Misogyny always wins. I think the most disheartening part of this for me, I don't think any of us expected there to actually ever be any consequences. First of all, can we talk about the difference between not guilty and innocent? Okay, it's very basic, it's very obvious, but judging by the things I saw, we need a little lesson, okay, in the difference. It's different to be found not guilty because of either lacking evidence or because the lawyers were too good or because he has the money and the victims don't. And so he had, the money for the better lawyers or whatever the case may be. Usually money talks in a capitalist society. Being found not guilty on a technicality or technicalities does not equal innocence. And many people need to learn that lesson, starting with all of the players that came out in defense of Ben Mundy. And I have a list from those days. And I, I hesitate to even like bring any of this up, but some of these names specifically, because it's not about that, right? It's not about that. It's just like whenever we talk about fascism, whenever we talk about, Trump and things like that, it's never about Trump. It's about what he inspires in people, right? It's what these people inspire in their followers, and then people come to in their defense and all that stuff. So I do want to read through some of the names on this list of folks who went public with their defense of a rapist. I mean, you could have just shut the fuck up. Shutting the fuck up is free. And then we wouldn't now have to cancel all of you, right? Again, cancel culture is not real because they all keep their money. They all keep their clout. Their little misogynist followers now have more, balls to come out and say, hey, yeah, like rape culture is not real. This is, women, the amount of like little, like, chirpy people I saw coming out to be like, see, like women lie and like women should face the same consequences as rape, like for fake accusations. Like, newsflash, even by your logic, that would be them facing no consequences. So sure, let's go by that, right? There are no consequences. It is abysmal, the rate of convictions of any sort of of justice coming to rapists. It's abysmal. Like how few cases even make it to court, let alone actually get, go through the process and then ever get any justice for the victim. It's like abysmally low, less than, I don't know, it's in the very, very low ones of a percentage. But it's one thing to be Ben Mundy, right? It's one thing to be the rapist. And it's quite another to come to their defense loudly. You could have just shut the fuck up. Maybe that is the name of the episode. You could have just shut the fuck up. Shutting the fuck up is free, right? The ongoing list of footballers who showed support. The first one I saw in the wild and had to unfollow immediately was Paul Pogba. I have defended that man. That man has gotten slandered, sometimes unjustly, sometimes probably with some, like he is a little bit, on the arrogant side and all that stuff. But there's always, I watched the Pogmentary, which I think should have been called the Pogumentary for linguistic reasons. But I watched it. I felt sympathy for him, right? There's lots of stuff. I defended him through thick and thin. He played for my team. I like him on France. And he was the first I saw in the wild myself publicly defend his buddy. And I had to unfollow him. And like, it was really disheartening. And then I come to Twitter to find out he's one of like 50 players that have openly come out in support of this man as if he was the victim and not the perpetrator of rape. So, it's a tough time to be a woman in the sports space, right? Especially in the football space. Names that stick out to me from this list of defenders of Ben Mundy. Memphis Depay was the first, and he tweeted it, and then lots of these other players came to that tweet, like to show their support. Jack Grealish, not surprised. He's a lad, and he definitely looks like a douchebag. Who else? I mean, the list is exhaustive, right? Pogba's on here, obviously. Who else is notable? Lots of there's Dembele, like people who you think, Joao Felix, like people who you think like were okay people, right? Neymar, not surprising because he's a fascist Bolsonaro supporter, so that checks out. Boateng, I think, is surprising. I mean, like just insane. Weston McKennie, not surprising because United Station. Bruno Fernandez, Taram, whom I loved. I think I have Taram's name on my Bro Russia kit, if I'm not mistaken. Wijnaldum. Who else? Who else is notable? Cancelo, Virgil van Dijk. That one shocked me. Jesse Lingard, my one true love. Jesse Lingard, few people know this. I don't think I've said this on my podcast yet. Jesse Lingard is the reason I am a Manchester United fan. You heard it here first. That is breaking news for listeners of this podcast. Jesse Lingard is the reason I am a Manchester United fan. And here he is on his list showing support. Lewandowski, not surprised. He's a fascist, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's on Diego Costa, fucking douchebag. Sure. Like, of course he's on this list. Pavard, I thought he was cool, right? I mean, it goes on and on. Like, look at this thread is exhaustive. Okay. The names that are on here are just, it's nonstop. It's nonstop. They've come out of the woodwork, okay, to defend a rapist. Like, imagine if they had A, shut the fuck up, B, put that energy towards defending shit that matters, right? Like, none of these. Here's a great point. I'm about to make a great point here, right? Players, football players, like sportscasters, people in the space, people in the field, you know, they love to strike fear into folks and being like, oh, don't be too political. Don't be too controversial. Make sure you toe that line. You know where I'm going with this, right? This shit proves that is bullshit. It is not about not being political. It is not about not taking sides or not wanting to offend. Okay, because here's the prime example of a time you could have just shut the fuck up. You wanted to not be controversial. Don't defend a fucking rapist. All right. And yet here you are. So this is definitive proof when people say don't be controversial, don't, be whatever, don't voice your opinion. It's not about being political. It's not about voicing your opinion. It's about the fucking message. It's okay to defend fascism. It's okay to defend a rapist, but let you be on the side that is against rape, that is against racism. Now you're too controversial. Now you're too radical. Now you're too this. Now you're too that. You're all fucking hypocrites, okay? You're all fucking hypocrites. Every single last name on that list and every single last person that came out in defense of this fucking latest rapist, who's not, by the way, the only one that's even now still being defended, okay? We have one on my team. There's one at Arsenal. Like, it is just incomprehensible that this continues to happen, that we continue to let teams and people and players get away with it and turn the other way and pretend it's not happening and be in denial because it's our team. Fuck no. Okay. This has got to stop. And this is going to lead right into the Women's World Cup discussion, because what there is too is a lot of virtue signaling around this and very little action. And for me, that's so hypocritical. And like, sometimes it's debilitating. Sometimes it's like, it's so bad that it's hard to even comment, right? This is a few days removed now from when this came out. When this first came out that he was found not guilty and all that stuff, and it was like a shit show on Twitter, I didn't really participate that much because honestly, sometimes I just don't have the emotional bandwidth or capacity to get into shit, right? But like, the shit I saw from people who were complicit in misogynist slander campaigns, from people who are complicit in defending harassers and, and people like that in real life. Like, I just had to sit back, had to take a little break, right? I had to take a little break from commenting because it's just not, it doesn't compute. It doesn't compute. My biggest thing is authenticity and transparency. And I can't stand hypocrisy. It's like, like when it's like cynical, like just like blatant, obvious shit. So I don't know, man. Shit sucks. we've got rapists, going free. We've got rapists being welcomed back to teams. Cancel culture is not real unless, in certain cases where the canceled are marginalized and too radical, then that's a whole other discussion. And that has to do a lot more with other stuff rather than what, they're actually being canceled for. But that's a whole other discussion. But cancel culture is not real. These people are still making money. These people are still being defended. These people will still have whatever the fuck they want in life and access to everything. And that is systemic misogyny in a nutshell. And with that, we'll go to break and come back and talk a little bit more about misogyny. See you in a bit.
Hey, make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. And help us out by leaving a rating and review, and remember to share it with a friend. Don't forget to follow Franca on Twitter and Instagram at Francamente for the latest news. And lastly, please visit realfrancamente.com for bonus content, including articles, photos, and for more information about the podcast.
We're talking misogyny. We're talking hypocrisy. I think misogyny is the tying thread here between, and it was the perfect segue to talk about, hypocrisy and clout chasing and, and these, false narratives to talk about the Women's World Cup. Let's talk about the Women's World Cup. It has started. As of recording time, it is day 2. And the USA game is going to start in a little bit. I'm cheering for Vietnam hardcore. Obviously, realistically, what I at least hope doesn't happen is that the US doesn't get arrogant. Well, there's no hope in that. And start to, run up the score or whatever. I hate that. But US is going to US. And so that's where we're at. So we've had one day of games. The first day, New Zealand played Norway. New Zealand won 1-0. Nigeria and Canada tied. That was an interesting game. And Australia and Ireland played as well. And Australia won that game 1-0. And then the second day of games saw Switzerland facing the Philippines. Switzerland won 2-0. Spain beat Costa Rica 3-0. And the third game of today is the US versus Vietnam. The times are interesting, right? The times are interesting because 2 of the games have been in the middle of the night. And then there's or very early morning. And then there's one game that's way, way later in the day. Is that technically, I don't know. I know that the time difference is extreme. I just find that very, very interesting. So Women's World Cup, there's a lot of misogyny around it, but I have thoughts that are probably not going to be conventional by most standards, and I'm going to get into it now. There's a lot of virtue signaling in the women's football space. And virtue signaling is a word that gets co-opted by bigots, for sure. But it is still worth mentioning it and calling it out when it happens on the supposed our side of things, right? The whatever we want to call it, the progressive side, or the I guess the liberal side when we get into what's really happening here, right? So as a woman, I have never really been into women's football. I'm sure there's some internalized misogyny. We all have, stuff to work on, regardless of how far on our journey we are in terms of social justice. Probably some internalized misogyny there, but genuinely, and this is just literally how I feel, it is not as exciting for me to watch. That's a talking point that, bigots will take and reclaim. So I'm saying this here, which is a safe space. It's my podcast. I can say what I want to. I have never really found it that exciting. Like, I think it's disingenuous too. Because here's the thing, right? Like, francamente, I'm going to be frank, I'm going to be honest, right? I think it's disingenuous when you see the narratives around this and like they're like, oh, it's just as good, or it's this, or like trying to compare it to men's, or it should be just as popular, or whatever, or it is just as popular. Like, it's disingenuous. It is not at the same level, and we can't pretend it is. And it is based on misogyny, and it's based on the fact that the men's sport has been around forever, and women were not allowed to participate. That is systemic misogyny and injustice, okay? They weren't allowed to participate for a long time. So, of course, there's a lot of catching up to do in terms of everything that makes football exciting, right? I don't care if that is a cancelable offense or opinion. Again, it's my podcast. There's millions of podcasts you could listen to. If you don't like this one, move on, right? Move along. That being said, so it's not my cup of tea, but I think a lot of my hesitation, and sometimes a word does not sound right to me in either language. My hesitation to get really involved in women's football discourse is from the disingenuous virtue signaling that I see specifically in US women's football fandom. There's a lot of that type of like virtue signaling, like, oh, I can't stand this when people are like, oh, there's no major tournaments being played, or like whatever, like this is what do you mean there's a World Cup being played? Like, it's disingenuous when like everyone knows what you're doing, right? Or they're like, oh, so and so is the first player to do this, and everyone comes in and be like, the first men's player, or the first man to do it if like a woman did it first. And it's like, I get it, but what is your true, like, I'm sorry, but especially men, okay, and especially white men, what is your true like driving force there? Are you trying to get clout or like get noticed and like get pat on the back? Like, or do you genuinely feel that way? Because I don't feel the need to go in with those stats and be like, oh, a woman did it first. Like, and I do this for a living, okay? Point out injustice and do social justice work. So I just think there's a lot of like clout chasing and disingenuous type of stuff like that, where it's like, it almost also sometimes seems like an inferiority complex thing. And this is where I'm going to go with this. Okay. I am the biggest football fan in my life, like that I know, right? The biggest football fan that I know. Love the sport so much, teach about it, have published about it, have presented internationally about it, have a podcast about it, talk about it nonstop, have 6 million kids. Like, it is it's my life. It's my religion. Okay. I don't feel the need. I don't have an inferiority complex about it. I am very confident. This is backed up by science. It's the number one sport in the world. Like, that's not questionable, right? In the world. Just because it's not popular in the US, that doesn't mean shit to me, because this country ain't shit, right? I don't feel the need to constantly be like, oh, football, like you should like it, like, or convince like United Stations or people that don't, that are too dumb, too ignorant, too US centric, too white supremacist to realize that this is the best sport in the world. That's not my problem. You don't like football, that's a you problem. That's not my problem. Okay. You don't like football. That's a you problem. I'm not going to try to convince you to like my sport. Like, it's the best sport in the world. You don't like it. Goodbye. If I had an inferiority complex about it, I would go around trying to convince people to like my sport. I don't need to. You don't like it. That's a you problem. What is the parallel here? Women women's football fans that go around trying to convince everyone to like women's football or to like consider it the same or consider that's an inferiority complex. Why are you trying to convince people that don't rate your sport to like it? Why do you want bigots to like your sport? Like, you spend that energy liking it, promoting it, doing what you have to do, but it looks thirsty and desperate to constantly be out there like, oh, this, like, oh, like consider this, or like if people are like, oh, it's not on the, on the top list of like news or whatever, like half the people don't know that this is even happening, the Women's World Cup. And visibility is a thing to definitely strive for. But there's no need to constantly be like fighting and defensive. Like, enjoy your sport, like do your thing, say what you have to say, do your analysis, do whatever. There is no need to always be like in that space, right? Like, I have my podcast, I have my kids, I wear them, I talk to the people in my circles. If someone's interested in football, I will gladly welcome you. I will gladly educate you. I'll help you. I'm not out here searching for people that like fucking hand egg and fucking baseball to like my sport, which is far superior. I'm fully confident. I have no doubt and no qualms about it, right? It feels desperate, some of the narrative. And so that's a turnoff, especially because there's the hypocrisy that most of these people in the women's football Twitter are United Station, and you're still supporting imperialism by supporting the US. Just because they're women does not mean that it's any more socially just. On some level, yes, there's the equal pay stuff, everything like that. But the US is still imperialist as fuck. It is still like kind of cringe and embarrassing to be so happy that the women's team's so good when like the resources that the US has compared to the rest of the world. Of course, the US team is always going to win the World Cup because other countries don't have access to resources and fields and cleats and equipment and whatever the fuck you need. That is imperialism. And so supporting imperialism because it's women, still not okay. It's still not noble. It's not like there's still, tons of fascism. I'm going to pause here to note how funny it was when Arsenal, by the way, and I need to do this because it's a callback to my last episode. Okay. Messi coming to MLS. MLS played their all-star game against preseason Arsenal and got their asses whooped and handed to them 5-0. Okay. You're going to tell me that league is rated in the world? Come on now. MLS fanboys, you need to calm down. With that, when they were singing the national anthem and doing like the military shit, whatever, the Arsenal players were having a field day. Like, absolutely. Like, do you not realize as United Stations, you are the laughing stock of the world in every way? You're the laughing stock of the world in every way. Like, it is insane that y'all still think you're so great. And so all of that was a pause, like a parentheses. All of this is connected to why it's kind of cringe for me to participate in women's football discourse, because yikes, it's just not like there's so much like just hypocrisy, virtue signaling. There's a lack of critical analysis. Okay. And just being, it feels to me like folks who think they're doing anti-racist work by just talking about like Black Lives Matter, the organization, when there's so much more work to do for anti-racism now. And like those people pat themselves on the back, like, see, I put a black square on my Instagram. It's the same thing. It's like, see, I'm rooting for the US women. Yay, equal pay, and let's support the NWSL. Like, and then you don't do shit to actually help women's empowerment or like help women, like be less marginalized and all that in real life. It's cringe to me. I hesitate to celebrate it because it does not compute. It doesn't feel authentic to me. And it would be very inauthentic of me and very disingenuous of me, a person who has never in my life really watched beyond the World Cup. Like, I'll watch like the Women's World Cup, but I don't participate in any other sort of women's football discourse. It would be disingenuous of me to now start pretending for clout that I'm this like expert on women's football. I don't know shit. I don't know shit. That's not my space. I'm happy to admit that. I'm happy to step aside and let folks who have been, following the sport for their whole life take the lead. That's not a problem for me. I think it would be disingenuous of me to pretend, right, to be this like big fan of women's sports just because I'm a woman. That would actually be, more hypocritical than me just being honest. Like, I watch as an outsider. I love that it's happening. I love that it's growing. I'm happy. And there's also critiques to be made, right? In terms of, especially as it pertains to the U.S. women's national team. But as with everything, there's nuance, and there is a lot of misogyny in the way it's talked about. And that I will always jump in, right? Because misogyny is misogyny. Like, what we're not going to do is, say shit like, because the reality is that the women that play football are tougher than the men. If you watch a men's game, and like the men are like rolling around and crying, the women, like, it takes a lot to get a penalty. It takes a lot to get a foul. And that is because of internalized misogyny and the way that they know that if they're seen as weak, we're already seen as weak as women. Right. And so there's definitely something there to analyze in terms of how misogyny comes into play and how, like, people are like, oh, the women are so much tougher. They are. First of all, yes, we are way tougher ever in life than men, but in the game, right? And you see in the way it's reffed and everything like that. There's so much misogyny in the way that, like, there's not even a woman on the world feed calling the games. The fuck is that? Come on. So there's just so much misogyny. We will always call that out at Real Francamente TM, bias your football content. But what we're not going to do is be disingenuous and be virtue signalers and be complicit and that kind of thing. Cause it's just not, it. I don't like it. I see it and it makes me cringe. And what we're certainly most definitely not going to do is support the US just because it happens to be women. Like, fuck no. Yeah, they'll probably advance. They might win. I don't know. But regardless, we're always going to root against them. Be anti-imperialist, be anti-capitalist always as much as possible. And always keep fighting misogyny. So with that, I thank you so much for listening. I patiently await the feedback from this controversial, even for me, episode. And I will catch you on the next one. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you liked it. This has been Real Francamente, the podcast. My name is Franca. I'm your host. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Real Francamente on both. And check out our website, www.realfrancamente.com. You can find lots of content there, or contact us directly with any questions or comments. All links and @ will be in the show notes if you need them or want them, and for ease of not having to spell it yourself. Please subscribe on your favorite platform and maybe leave us a rating and a review if you like it, and share with your friends. Don't forget to bias your football content. Gracias y chao.